Something carved the Missouri River in a nearly straight line for over 200 miles across the American plains. Geologists will tell you water did that over millions of years the river cut its own path through the earth. But here is the problem. Water does not cut in straight lines. Water meanders, water curves, water finds the path of least resistance, and that path is almost never a ruler-straight corridor running at a consistent depth across flat terrain. So what actually made that channel? That question is the reason this video exists. And by the time we are done, you are going to be looking at every river on the map differently. Across 6 continents, researchers in the alternative history community, geologists working outside mainstream institutions, and a growing number of engineers have started pointing at something hiding in plain sight. The world's major river systems, when examined at scale, show geometric precision that natural water flow cannot produce. Straight segments, parallel corridors, canyon walls with horizontal cuts at consistent elevations, riverbeds that are miles too wide for the rivers currently sitting inside them. The theory that has emerged from this research is one of the most unsettling ideas in the alternative history space. Someone, or something, mined the earth. They carved massive industrial channels across continents to extract what was beneath the surface. And when they were finished, or when they were gone, those channels slowly filled with groundwater, rainfall, and runoff. We inherited those channels. We built our civilizations along them. And we called them rivers. This is not a fringe claim with no evidence. This is a pattern visible from satellite imagery over the Sahara Desert, from drone footage of the Grand Canyon's canyon walls, from the anomalous underfit rivers of the British Isles, and from pre-colonial maps of North America that show river placements that do not match anything natural erosion could have produced. Let's start with the thing geologists call underfit rivers, because this is where the official story begins to crack. An underfit river is a river that is dramatically too small for the valley it occupies. The Cotswolds in England contain rivers flowing through valleys 10 to 15 times wider than the rivers themselves. The standard explanation is that glacial meltwater carved those valleys during the last ice age, and today's rivers are just the remnant. That sounds reasonable until you look at the walls. Glacial carving leaves specific signatures: rounded valley floors, U-shaped cross-sections, striations on the rock from ice movement. The underfit river valleys of England show almost none of that. What they show instead are flat-bottom channels with near-vertical walls, consistent depths running for dozens of miles, and sediment compositions that do not match glacial deposition. They look, to put it plainly, like something dug them. Now move to the American Southwest. The prehistoric canal systems of the Hohokam people in what is now Arizona represent the largest pre-Columbian irrigation network ever discovered in North America. Over 800 miles of canals, some of them 30 feet wide and 15 feet deep, built by a civilization that supposedly had no metal tools. Archaeologists date some of these canals to around 800 CE, but the channels they follow, the geological depressions they trace, are much older than that. The Hohokam did not dig those primary channels, they cleaned them out, they maintained what was already there. The question of who made the original channels in the American Southwest has no official answer. The mainstream position is that erosion and natural water flow created the primary geography, and the Hohokam then improved on it. But the walls of those original channels show quarry marks, consistent horizontal scoring at regular intervals, the kind of marks left not by water, but by something cutting laterally through rock. This is where the theory branches into territory that makes academics uncomfortable. Running along the corridors of the world's major rivers, and particularly in the bedrock beneath ancient riverbeds, you find some of the densest concentrations of mineral wealth on the planet. The Missouri River corridor runs directly over some of the richest lead and zinc deposits in North America. The Nile flows through a geological zone containing gold, copper, and manganese that ancient Egyptians exploited for thousands of years from mines clustered along the river's banks. The Indus River system in Pakistan and India traces a path directly over one of the largest copper belts on Earth. This is not coincidence, according to the researchers making this argument. This is the point. The channels were made to access those deposits. They were industrial excavations on a continental scale. The material extracted from the channels themselves, the rock and earth removed to create the corridors, was processed for ore. and the channels that remained were so deep and so wide that groundwater gradually filled them from below, rainfall filled them from above, and within a few centuries they looked exactly like rivers. The Sahara Desert complicates this picture in a way that satellite imagery has made impossible to ignore. Under the surface of the modern Sahara, ground-penetrating radar surveys have revealed a vast network of ancient river channels, hundreds of them. Some are as wide as the modern Nile. They run in patterns that suggest not natural drainage but a coordinated system, channels feeding into larger channels at angles that an engineer would recognize as deliberate. The official explanation is that during the African humid period, roughly 6,000 to 11,000 years ago, the Sahara was green and wet, and these rivers flowed on the surface. The water eventually dried up and sand covered everything. But look at the geometry of those buried channels. Natural river networks form dendritic patterns branching like tree roots, curving and splitting based on gravity and local topography. The buried channels of the Sahara form something closer to a grid. Parallel lines, right angles, corridors of consistent width running for hundreds of miles. If this is a natural drainage system, it is the most geometrically precise natural drainage system ever discovered on Earth. Now bring in the Tartaria argument, because this is where the alternative history community connects the mining hypothesis to the broader theory of a civilizational reset. The Tartarian Empire, as described in alternative history circles, was an advanced global civilization that existed before the mid-1800s and was essentially erased from the historical record following a catastrophic event, likely connected to the mud flood accounts found in local histories across Europe, Asia, and North America. The argument is that this civilization operated at a technological level far beyond what mainstream history credits to pre-industrial societies, and that the infrastructure of this civilization, including large-scale mining operations, transport canals, and energy harvesting systems, is still visible in the landscape if you know what you're looking for. The rivers fit this framework in a specific way. A civilization capable of continental-scale mining would need to transport extracted material efficiently. Water transport is the most energy-efficient method for moving heavy raw materials over long distances. If you carve a channel, fill it with water, and place your extraction sites along its length, you have a transport and processing system built into the same infrastructure. The rivers are not just mine shafts, they are also highways. This explains something that has never been adequately addressed in mainstream archaeology. Why do virtually every ancient civilization on Earth appear along major river systems? The standard answer is that rivers provide fresh water and fertile floodplains for agriculture. That is true. But it does not explain why the cities appear specifically where they do along those rivers, clustered at points that correspond to the narrowing of the channel, the presence of waterfalls or rapids, or locations directly above major mineral deposits. Carthage sat above phosphate deposits. Babylon was positioned over bitumen and gypsum beds. The ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley sits directly on top of one of the largest flint flake tool production sites ever discovered. These cities were not just drinking from the rivers, they were mining what the rivers had exposed. The canyon argument deserves its own examination because the Grand Canyon is the most dramatic version of something seen worldwide. The official formation story of the Grand Canyon is that the Colorado River carved it over roughly 5 to 6 million years. A river cut a canyon 1 mile deep up to 18 miles wide and over 270 miles long. The problem is the physics. The Colorado River, even at peak historical flow, does not have the erosive power to cut through the Kaibab Plateau the way the canyon's walls suggest. The canyon is wider at the top than at the bottom in ways that are inconsistent with water cutting downward. The walls show horizontal striations at consistent elevations running for miles, which would require a cutting agent moving laterally, not a river flowing vertically downward through rock. Alternative researchers have pointed out that the Grand Canyon looks, from aerial perspective, exactly like what you would expect an open-pit mine to look like, scaled up by orders of magnitude. The material removed from the canyon, billions of tons of sandstone, iron limestone and shale, is simply gone. There is no debris field downstream large enough to account for it. Where did that material go? Official geology says it washed into the Gulf of California over millions of years, but researchers who have examined the Gulf of California's sediment composition say the timeline and the volumes do not add up. The cartographic evidence adds another dimension that is difficult to dismiss. Maps produced before 1750 consistently show river systems in configurations that differ from current geography in ways that cannot be explained by surveying error alone. The Piri Reis map of 1513 shows the Saharan River network in positions that correspond closely to the buried channels discovered by modern radar surveys, channels that by 1513 had been underground for thousands of years. And how did a Turkish admiral in the 16th century have accurate information about subterranean river systems in North Africa? The Boache map of 1737 shows Antarctica without its ice sheet, depicting river systems on the Antarctic landmass that have since been confirmed by subglacial radar surveys. These rivers exist under the ice, they are real, and somehow they appear on a map produced 2 centuries before anyone had the technology to detect them. The alternative history argument is that these maps were copied from much older source documents, maps produced by the Tartarian civilization, or its predecessors who surveyed the planet before the reset event. The rivers on those older maps were not rivers yet. They were active mining corridors. The mapmakers drew what they saw, or what was recorded before them, and the channels drawn on those maps are now rivers. The water filling argument is actually the least speculative part of this entire theory, because the mechanics are straightforward. If you carve a channel deep enough into the Earth's surface, groundwater will begin seeping into it from the surrounding rock almost immediately. Rainfall will collect in it. If the channel connects to an existing water table, it will fill relatively quickly on a geological timescale. Within a few hundred years, a deep artificial channel in a moderate climate would be carrying flowing water. The vegetation would colonize the banks. Sediment would begin accumulating on the floor. Within 1,000 years, it would be indistinguishable from a natural river to anyone who had not seen it before the filling began. And this is precisely what the mainstream timeline suggests happened. The rivers we see today became rivers within roughly the last 10,000 years. The last ice age ended approximately 12,000 years ago. Sea levels rose dramatically, climate patterns shifted, and rivers across the world appear in the geological record as fully formed, flowing systems almost simultaneously, as if they switched on rather than gradually developed. If these channels existed before the Ice Age, carved by a civilization we no longer have records of, then the Ice Age itself and the subsequent sea level rise could have been exactly the mechanism that filled them. Meltwater flooding into pre-existing channels across multiple continents, establishing flow patterns that persist to this day. This brings the theory full circle to the civilization reset question. Whatever mined those channels is gone. The civilization, the technology, the records, all of it disappeared with enough completeness that what replaced it had no memory of the previous world. The people who came after built on the banks of the channels because the water was there, the minerals were there, and the flat prepared terrain along the channel corridors was the easiest place to build. They called the channels rivers because they had always been rivers in living memory. No one alive remembered what they were before. The Tartaria theory does not require you to believe in aliens or magic. It requires you to believe that human civilization is older and more technically advanced in the deep past than mainstream academia currently acknowledges. And that a catastrophic event erased the evidence in a way that left only the infrastructure behind. The infrastructure is the rivers. You have been drinking from mining shafts your entire life. You have been watching ships sail through industrial corridors built by people whose name we no longer know. Every civilization in human history established itself along the evidence of the one that came before it. The Missouri River runs straight for 200 miles across the American plains. Water does not do that. Something else did. And whatever it was here before us. It moved more earth than every modern construction project in human history combined. It left channels on 6 continents that we filled with water and called rivers. And then it was gone. So completely that we built our entire understanding of human history without leaving room for it. The next time you look at a river on a map, look at the straight segments. Look at where the canyon walls are too clean. Look at what is buried under the riverbed and ask yourself why the richest mineral deposits on Earth are always found along the water. Something mined this planet. We just moved in afterward. If this sent you down a rabbit hole, the video on screen right now goes deeper into the mud flood reset and what was buried under the cities we call ancient. Click it, because the rivers are just the beginning.